All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. I definitely have to start off with Verzuz. Patti LaBelle, Gladys Knight. I mean, what is there to say? That whole thing was just so amazing to witness. I enjoyed every moment of that. And mainly because, Gladys and Patti are so beloved within the community. They are such just legends in every black household where it's just like, man, what a treat. That was definitely a treat for 2020. Look, I'm starting to sound like the people that give the church announcements and they're like, if you missed last week's missionary extravaganza jubilee, you missed a treat. And then you find out it was like 6 people that went and they just served some spaghetti plates at the end. Relax, okay? Plus 2 of them people was ushers. Calm down, but okay. But no, I mean, it was, gosh, that thing was so good. Where do I start? I think what I connected with was one, it was so positive. Just this positive energy. And of course, the 2 of them are friends in real life. So they had a totally different essence than the previous one with Brandy and Monica. As much as I love Brandy and Monica's because I really love the songs, because the 2 of them have just kind of gotten back into a space where they can even be in the same room, kind of, the energy was a little weird. Still great thing. And like I said, their energy shifted towards the end and it was all good. But with Patti and Gladys, it felt like you were sitting in your grandma's living room and it's grandma and her friend from down the street that came over and they're just chopping it up. And I don't know, maybe you're like 5 or 6 and you're in the living room playing with your little toys on the floor while they're talking. Like, that's what it felt like. I mean, there was just a positive essence that came from it. And when we talk about essence, there was just this essence of familiarity that just exuded from both of them. It was almost like, or at least for me, like, even though I don't know them personally, I guess if you've lost a grandma or an aunt or a mother or any woman figure in your life that raised you, it felt like that was the essence they were giving off. Even though you didn't know them, it felt like just being in their presence, you knew everything was going to be all right. You know what I mean? Like, especially in 2020 with everything that's happening, for that little 2.5 hours, I was not thinking about any of the craziness that's been happening. I just felt like, we're gonna be all right. Everything is all good. There's a nurturing spirit that many black women just possess, and they don't even know that they have. It just comes naturally. It's not even anything they think about. Just everything about them. It gives you this space of just comfort, And so I enjoyed all of that. Everything from the music, Patti dancing, Gladys singing, and speaking of Gladys and the singing, for Gladys to be 77. And for her voice to be in such pristine shape, I was like, that is amazing. I mean, she sounded so good on literally anything she sung that night. Everything she sung. I mean, that tone was just so rich. And if you follow me, Gladys is one of my favorite altos, along with Brandy and Jasmine and Tony and Layla and Anita. Like, I always enjoyed Gladys. I got to see her, fortunately, 2 summers ago at Wolf Trap. And I mean, Gladys was tearing that show up. Gladys starts her shows on time. I was so pissed because she always starts her show with Love Overboard. And it was 8:03 when I got to my seat. And she was already to the bridge of Love Overboard. I'm like, dang, Gladys, you got to be on time for everything? Man. But, and I've seen Patti a few times, too. So, I enjoyed all of that. But, man, Gladys, that singing was just enjoyable. Even with Patti singing as well. But Patti, for me, is just, Patti is an entire experience. Because when Patti got to dancing, that was too good. And Patti was ready to cut a rug on the first song. They put out, what was that song? Feels Like Another One with Big Daddy Kane. And as soon as it came, Patti, I got to get down and go on, Patti. Like, oh, that was so good. It just made me think back to being a child because I grew up around a lot of older people. And there were a lot of women who raised me and my brother and my cousins. Like, it was my grandma, my mom, and the aunts. And there was a time period where my parents had moved to Korea for 1.5 years for their jobs. And so I was raised with my grandma and my aunts. And so I just started having flashbacks to that era because all of those women had different favorites that, they loved. Like, my mom was big on Patti and Aretha. So Patti was played a lot in the house as a child, especially that Burning album. That's the album that had Feels Like Another One and Somebody Loves You Baby and what's the song? When You Love Someone, Saving My Love For You, like that one. And so that was a lot. Even I used to be mad because normally when it got played, it was because it was like Saturday morning cleaning. So of course we all getting cussed out. Patty's playing in the background, the vacuum's on, mom's fussing about something, dad done broke something in the garage, my brother's crying, I got an attitude, Patty's giving the soundtrack to all the chaos in the house. And so, my mom was Patti and Aretha. I had an aunt that was all about Tina and Shaka, just all about the funk. Oh, and Patrice Rushen, those were her 3. And I had another aunt that was about Natalie and Anita. My grandma was all about Dinah Washington. Who else? She liked Dion too. And so it was just like, there was just a space of familiarity with all of that. It was so good to watch. And it's crazy because there is a connection that they had with so many people who were watching. And one of the coolest things I saw, somebody had made a post, and they weren't familiar with their music that well. Neither Patti or Gladys. They knew a handful of songs, but they had made this post where they were like, it's crazy because I don't know a lot of these Gladys songs, but I'm falling in love with each one as she sings them. Just because the delivery of how she presented the songs and how she sang them, it connected with people. And I think that's what true artistry is about, where you can pull in somebody even if they're not familiar with your work. Like, that's how you really pull in somebody, when you have a special gift that is only native to you, and when you express it, it automatically connects. Like, that's to me what artistry is, something that again is only native to you, that you exude, that makes you stand out from the rest. And so, a Gladys or a Patti, I mean, think about how beloved they are by people who weren't even around for their heydays. Like, Gladys Knight is not my era, Patti LaBelle is not my era. They were still making music. They were still getting hits while I was a child. But, their heydays were, the 70s and the 80s and even before then. And so, decades upon decades of just history and just a rich lineage of just great music. And again, like, these are your favorite artists' favorite artists' favorite artists. You know what I mean? And true story, the Itsy Bitsy Spider. So my mother was not a mother to really sing a lot of nursery rhymes to me for some reason, and my dad couldn't sing, so there wasn't going to be no nursery rhymes. And so the version of the Itsy Bitsy Spider I knew was the Patti LaBelle version, if that makes any sense. That's why I always thought that clip of Patti singing on Sesame Street was so cool, because it's like, okay, she's feeding, a bunch of material to a generation that's up and coming. And so going back in like, I want to say it had to be like 90, 91. Patti LaBelle was in this cartoon, and it was called The Real Story of the Itsy Bitsy Spider, something like that. It was a cartoon, and it's the Itsy Bitsy Spider story, but they just stretch it out into like a 30-minute little cartoon, and so everybody's a spider. Patti LaBelle was like a black widow. She was like the principal at the school or the teacher or something like that. But at the end of the movie, the other spiders that were the main characters, they were in this rock band. So Patti ends up singing at the end, and you know how Patti's gonna sing a song, And so I'm at daycare, right? And I'm probably 3 or 4, right? Probably like the only black kid in this daycare, because now this is like Washington State. And so, they're like, oh, we're gonna sing the Itsy Bitsy Spider. So I was getting ready to open my mouth to sing, and everybody starts, the Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the water spout. And I'm like, that ain't the version I know. And so, because the only version I knew was the Patti one. And like, if you heard it, I wish I could play the clip, but I don't want to fight with YouTube and licensing, but I'm going to try to have it playing on the side. But like, the Patti version was lit, because Patti had all this extra grit, and she, oh, itsy bitsy spider cried up the water spout. You know how Patti fires a song, down came the rain, watch the spider out. So funny. Like, that's what I knew at like 3 or 4. So that was the standard for me. And so I was looking at everybody in daycare like, okay, y'all can sing this if you want to, but man, that is so funny. God, but it was good. And then they didn't even get to do all of their songs. Like, they left out a lot of Gladys ones. Like, Gladys, she didn't do If I Was Your Woman. That was like, Gladys, what y'all doing over here? So they didn't do If I Was Your Woman. Mr. Welfare Man wasn't on there. Everybody Needs Love, which is one of my favorite ones. People forget about that song, but I love that song. It's one of the times where you hear Gladys use a little bit more of her falsetto. It Should Have Been Me. That's like from way back when. That's before, I think that's almost before the Motown days. Because you remember, like, I talked about this in a different video, but like Marvin Gaye, Gladys Knight, and the Pips, initially they were on Motown, but Motown acquired another record label that they were on, and that's how they got pulled into Motown, or at least Gladys Knight and the Pips, at least. And so there was that. I like Gladys' song Meet Me in the Middle. It was like New Jack Swing Gladys Knight. Remember, like, all the R&B divas from that era, they all had that New Jack Swing hit at the moment. So, Patti had Feels Like Another One. Aretha had, what was it? The word sweat is in it. Work it till you sweat it. Something like that. They all had that New Jack Swing song. That was Gladys's, Meet Me in the Middle. Heard It Through the Grapevine. I'm like, y'all skipping all the good stuff. And even with Patti, same thing. A lot of the Patti LaBelle and the Bluebell songs, or Labelle, a lot of those songs weren't included. But it is what it is. I enjoyed all of it. I spent too much time on this subject, but I just got excited all over again. I'm sorry. When I tell you, I just love R&B and soul music so much. And the way that black women literally carry the music industry sometimes, it's just like, man, appreciate these people while they're here. Because again, to see Patti, Dion, and Gladys on a stage together like that, that's a treat that you really have to embrace, because you don't know how many times you're going to still get to see something like that in this era. Just as time progresses and people get older and move on and transition into what's next, embrace these moments while we still have them. That's why I was so honored that Patti and Gladys were cool enough to do something like a Verzuz. And I mean, it really just felt like, man, so good, so good. Anyway, moving on. And then something I thought I would never see, because to be honest, I really thought I'd see Dame Dash and Jay-Z get back together before this ever happened. But Janet Hubert and Will Smith have been able to move past their differences, and apparently they have been able to squash the beef that once existed. As we know, it's about to be the 30th anniversary of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and I believe they're working on some kind of special, and so, they're getting the reunion stuff together and all the cast, and, Janet Hubert was invited, and then there was a picture that leaked, and it shows Will and Janet Hubert just having cordial conversation and laughing. Like, cool. I guess like 2020 is definitely the year of reconciliation. I mean, to be honest, look, if there's hope for those two, there's hope for anybody. As a matter of fact, I'm about to go back and fix one little friendship that we kind of beefing at the moment. I don't know what we beefing about, but we about to end that beef real quick, because I ain't got time. But and I value the friendship too much. But absolutely crazy. I was like, good for them, because man, I thought I would never see that, because the way Janet used to fry Will up every time I saw her on any interview, every time, that was the first thing she was gonna get to in every conversation. Jada could catch it too, the whole family. So good for them. I always like to see people move past whatever differences they have and boom, come back together. It's always good to see that. Okay, good energy all around. That's why I also enjoyed the Brandy and Monica verses too, especially the second half when they finally like loosened up and were comfortable with each other. Always good to see people just, you know what I mean? Speaking of television as well, I remember on the last live video I did, some of you kept asking me about Lovecraft Country, and I kept saying, well, look, I ain't got HBO no more, because apparently with the cable package I have, Xfinity and HBO are tripping, and Stars, they tripping too, and so sometimes I got the channels and sometimes I don't. It's just all a mess and I'm just living in it. But, I finally did get to catch Lovecraft Country via HBO Max. But, I'm only a few episodes in, but I like it. It's really, really good. It's very entertaining. And by the way, it goes in so many directions. You just don't know what's next. That's what threw me off, even with the first episode. Like, I was watching it, and, the first 30 minutes, I thought it was going one way, and next thing you know, it did a whole swing somewhere else. I'm like, what's going on? I was not ready at all. The acting is phenomenal. I appreciate that entire cast. The writing is good. I just love the fact that it's just this combination of like action, drama, sci-fi. It's a bunch of everything. I was like, this is kind of dope. So I look forward to following that show. It's one of the few ones I'm going to kind of pay attention to at the moment, because I'm trying to cut back. I'm starting to watch too much TV, so I need to kind of slow down a little bit. Plus, I got so many other things I'm working on. I'm like, I don't really get a lot of time to just sit and watch TV all day. So I said, let me slow down. But I will take the time to invest in Lovecraft Country, just because I also like a lot of the cast as well. And so that's really good. Last TV reference before we get into some heavier stories. And then Carole Baskin and Dancing with the Stars. Man, okay, so remember a few months back when COVID really had jumped off and a lot of people were at stay-at-home orders, like myself included, like DC was shut down, we was all in the house. I discovered ice cream again, so I was just in there eating ice cream, watching Netflix all day, and I was working from home. And, I was talking about Tiger King and just how it was the wildest thing I had ever seen on TV. Like, I was like, y'all can't ever say nothing about black folks again, because this thing here that I didn't see with these folks, like, especially remember there was that staff member who they got attacked by, I think, the alligator, and, their arm was all messed up, and they could have saved the arm, but the person wanted to go back to work so bad, they're like, oh, just cut the arm off. I was like, okay, all right, cool. So anyway, so that's that kind of wild. But remember, the lead person in there, the Joe Exotic, he always had the beef with this woman, Carole Baskin, who was, I guess, like the rival competition, because she also had her own zoo with a bunch of tigers, and, she'd have the little virtual videos, and, hey, out there, all you cool cats and kittens. And so, he believes that she killed her ex-husband, because the ex-husband disappeared back in the late 90s and nobody knows what happened to him and everything like that. And so he always kept saying she killed the husband, she killed the husband, she killed the husband. And so that kind of became a conversation for all of the spring, part of the summer. It became a viral little song on the social media platforms and everything. And that's kind of just been like an inside joke around the realms of social media. And so Carole Baskin is on Dancing with the Stars this season. And the family of the ex-husband, this is turning into such a gossip video, but man, the family of the ex-husband took out an ad that aired during Dancing with the Stars. And mind you, they must have some money if you can, pull out an ad for primetime TV and it airs nationally. But anyway, in the ad, the family's talking about how, they're still looking for their dad and how they miss their dad. And, if there's any information, there's a $100,000 reward. And if they also have any information that ties Carole Baskin to the disappearance of the father, let them know. I was like, this is wild. Imagine you're making your debut on Dancing with the Stars. You over there trying to cha-cha-cha and do whatever dance they got. And right before you go on, there was a commercial that airs about you possibly killing somebody. I was like, this is wild. This is like being in a real-time episode of Dateline. And we're like right at the good part. This is right before the bombshell evidence drops. You know what I mean? Because sometimes Dateline has those good episodes that are like 2 hours where, the whole first hour was building up everything and you thought it was solved, and then boom, some bombshell evidence and the whole story just shifts in another direction. And Carole, I don't know, man. I don't know. But man, that sucks. Just imagine you having a big event and then there's a commercial that comes on about you possibly killing somebody. That's like those clips I've seen where, actually there's a bunch of them, but the one I remember is there was this wedding and, they're doing the wedding ceremony and they're putting on the rings and doing the vow, and then the mistress was in the audience. And so as they're doing the vows, all you hear is that slow clap. And I remember watching like, oh, this is about to get real live. This is about to get real live. And so they're doing the vows and then the mistress is like, so this is who you left my house for this morning and the night before? I was like, dang. Wow. Like, I'm glad I wasn't in that one. I was so embarrassed for everybody in the video and I didn't even know the people. I'm like, jeez. Okay. Anyway, let's move on to some more serious stories. And then did you see this clip that was trending about the no mask rally that was taking place in Utah? Let's go to the clip and then we'll talk.
Now, hundreds have gathered here in front of the Washington County Administration building, calling for the end of a mask mandate, saying they are tired of not living their normal lives.
No more masks! No more masks! Not on the backs of my kids, or you're going to get more federal funding. That's how I feel about that.
Some rally attendees say they shouldn't ever wear masks if they have any medical issues or mental health concerns, or if they feel they simply can't breathe.
When George Floyd was saying, I can't breathe, and then he died, and now we're wearing a mask, and we say, I can't breathe, but we're being forced to wear it anyways.
But many stated that they believe in all cases, masks jeopardize kids' health. Parents are demanding they have the right to decide what to do with their children.
I'll tell you another reason I hate masks. Most child molesters love them.
School administrators responding that they don't understand why crowds are protesting them based on a mandate given by the governor.
They block them.
I'm not gonna lie, I get tired of talking about COVID, to be honest, but because it's so prevalent and it's our reality at the moment, it's kind of just that conversation you can't escape. But man, when I just say at this point with COVID, with some people, I'm just like, you know what, do you do whatever, jump off the bridge if you want to. I promise you I won't lose any sleep. I don't care if somebody goes and does what works for them, as long as it doesn't affect other people. That's the problem we're running into when it comes to everything surrounding something like COVID. The decisions of individuals affects everybody. And unfortunately in America, which in my opinion is a country that does not operate as a collective until it's time to be racist, other than that, this country is a country full of individuals. And so what you've seen since March is so much pushback every single time there's any kind of legislation or advice or recommendations that are put out there, because there's a lot of people in the American collective, specifically a lot of white Americans, but also other groups of people as well, who they don't take well to being told what to do. And you're seeing it a lot within the white collective. They really have convinced themselves that they are oppressed and that this is just absolutely a crazy just atrocity that's only happening to them. And I think what makes it frustrating is that COVID hit the globe. It didn't just hit the United States. And so you're watching other countries slowly come into their new norm because they found ways to tackle what's been happening with COVID. And so here in the United States, not the case. Every time you think there's some progress, things get worse. Like when you look at the numbers, I'm just like, this is wild. And again, we recognize that COVID is not really killing a lot of the people who catch it. And there's a lot of people who catch it who don't even know they get it, And so I get that, but the issue is this: because this is still a respiratory, virus, that there's so much information that still isn't known. That's one of the reasons why they're struggling to get a freaking vaccine or a remedy or anything, because there's so much that's still unknown about it. And at this point, the only thing people do know is that there are some people who catch it, and when they catch it, they get a really bad case and they're no longer here. And when you fast forward to 200,000 people dying at this point, Clearly, this is something to care about, and people are still breaking their necks to say the speech about, well, there's more people that die from the flu. No, that was 100,000 bodies ago. We're past that threshold at this point, and so what I'm seeing is like, I see that clip as like a privileged goalpost that keeps getting moved, because at this point now you're seeing people use talking points to fit their narrative, when in reality other times they could give two craps about that talking point. Like, even like one of the funniest things I saw some crazy politician talking about Benghazi, I think yesterday, and I'm like, really? Because, you need to investigate Benghazi. People still want to go after Hillary and Barack Obama about that. And I'm like, okay, so if you have that energy for the 4 people who were killed over there, why is that same energy not being, put to the 200,000 people who have pretty much died at this point? And the fact that they're predicting that there could be, another 100 or 200,000 people die before January. And I'm like, where's that same energy for Benghazi? Y'all did 10 however many investigations into Benghazi, and you won't shut up about it. But all of a sudden, when it comes to people who are literally dying for existing on American soil, which is supposed to be the greatest country in the world, because of course, this is one place where they teach American exceptionalism, which I've said before, American exceptionalism, and that idea is going to be the reason why America has its downfall anyway. Because when you just become, just ignorant to reality and you live in your own bubble, eventually that bubble will collapse as it's surrounded by reality. So y'all keep staying in this American exceptionalism. We're so special and nothing affects us and the rest of the world is all backwards and, we're the greatest and we're the greatest. Okay, y'all keep believing that if you want to. But you're seeing just literally in this country, people just, the logic is out the window. So like I said, that goalpost is just being pushed. And the most triggering part in that clip is that woman who decides to bring up George Floyd. And, when he said he couldn't breathe, that happened, he died, and now we're saying it and nobody's listening. I'm like, again, that's not even coming from a place of empathy or understanding. That's a place of, again, like we said, a privileged goalpost that's being moved. That same woman, I can tell you right now, gave 2 F words about a George Floyd. She probably was one of the same people on social media trying to say, oh, he couldn't breathe because he was a drug addict and he was high. That was the problem. He shouldn't have did the crime. Probably one of those same people. But now that she can twist it to fit her narrative, she will use that. And again, the fact is, that's a very privileged way of doing things, because again, she's not coming from a place of empathy or understanding. It's a place of privilege where pretty much she will utilize black oppression to further her argument to stay privileged and not have to have her kids go to school and wear a mask, because that's what the protest was about. These people have went and got together and they're so frustrated and outraged at the fact that there's been a mandate that's requiring that their children wear a mask in order to go to school. And that has them so enraged that now they're out here protesting. And they're protesting at the wrong spot because it was mandated by the higher ups, not even that specific school. But people have lost it, and they're willing to pretty much just throw their own children out there to the wolves because they want to prove a point. That's what you're seeing a lot of times within the United States, where people are willing to let the ship burn and go down, all in the name of being right, even if they're wrong. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna prove a point. It doesn't matter what happens. And that's literally what you're watching. You're just watching a disaster unfold each and every single day. And some people have been so locked and set in their ways. There's nothing you can do to change how they feel. It is what it is. They are gonna hold on to it. They will go to the grave over this. Look at Herman Cain. Imagine all the things to die from. Come on. And I know somebody's going to say, oh, well, he had cancer. No, that was a decade before. Let's not even bring that up. And so, foolery, you know what I mean? Trying to make some kind of political statement and prove a point, and you're the maverick, and again, American exceptionalism, and then you go to a rally, indoors, you catch the mess. You knew you were 74 to begin with, and now you're not even here no more. Make that make sense. No disrespect to the dead, but are you kidding me? And so, again, the selfishness that exists, because even with the parents, you would think something like a school, they were already privileged enough where the schools were open because they probably raised hell to begin with. There wasn't going to be a conversation about virtual education. And I know that the virtual education is another conversation because we do recognize that there are a lot of parents who don't have the luxury to be home with their children, to monitor, or they don't have the luxury to pay for something like a daycare, and school was daycare. I totally understand that. So that's another conversation that could be on a different video. But again, these people who already have the luxury where they can send their kids to school and they're willing to send their kids to school by any means necessary. Just absolutely crazy. And with that, think about a school. Kids are in school for like 6, 7, 8 hours a day, sitting in the same room, breathing the same air, 6, 7, 8 hours. And of course, children also are going to struggle with the mask. Just, there's something they just cannot keep on all the time. So they're going to constantly be taking it off. If they start doing recess or gym play, they're going to take it off. They're going to want to run and everything. And so the chances of it spreading, it's just as high as what you're seeing in the colleges. You're looking at some of these universities that have reopened, and some universities had stricter policies than others, and you're seeing the numbers skyrocket and flare up at some. And again, going back to this woman with George Floyd, like, how dare you even utter your mouth to say that kind of foolery? George Floyd is not something that can be interchangeable with you not having to wear a mask for a few moments. You didn't die. You're not dying of asphyxia. Nobody had a knee on your neck. And again, with George Floyd, we recognize that whole situation is a larger part of a bigger conversation that is compiled with many, many layers and complexities, because George Floyd is just one piece of a larger puzzle. If you start talking about George Floyd, you have to have the conversation of police brutality and the fact that these police were able to literally lynch a man unarmed on camera, unapologetically, no shame, because they recognize that the system would protect them and that, they can do whatever they want. And you've seen it ever since these protests kind of started after the death of George Floyd. You saw so many police departments just literally do whatever they want. They didn't even care about being on camera. Okay, I'm on camera, it's fine. I'm still going to run you over with my car. Police are running people over with the car. People are getting beat down to the point where they're losing, eyeballs. They're getting shot in their face with tear gas. And you've just seen the violence just escalate. It's open season. It's a free-for-all because the police know that they're protected by a certain system. And the current administration that's in place, is pretty much enabling this behavior because they're aligning with the police. It goes back to the conversation we had on the last video when you just talking about why the police pretty much are unable to do the things that they're doing. And then even with that system protecting them, you recognize that system is rooted in systemic racism. And we recognize that systemic racism is one of the things that keeps commerce circulating within this country. Because when you talk about the origins of the United States and the foundational wealth that this country has accumulated, it's all come from the oppression of free black labor and black oppression. Because even when slavery ended, you jump into something like sharecropping. And then when you even jump into limitations when it came to access and resources for black people collectively, because there were so many ordinances and laws that prevented black people from having anything, it gave an advantage to white Americans who pretty much have a head start on building their lives and building generational wealth. And we've had this conversation so many times on this channel, but still I gotta keep saying it. But again, like, all of that ties into everything. There's so many layers to have, but for someone like that woman, one, if she even understands any of that, I don't even think that's even in her mental capacity, to be honest. She don't care about anything like that. That's nothing on her radar, nothing she'll ever experience, nothing she cares about. And so for her, she feels that she has the leverage to just kind of randomly bring up George Floyd and compare it to not wearing a mask. I'm just like, the selfishness, the disrespect, and just the overt racism that just jumps out. I'm like, I cannot. I really cannot. It even reminds me, did you see the clip of the students from, Miami University, where mind you, the students had COVID. It was a handful of them. They already tested positive. They're supposed to be quarantining, stay, away from other people and stay in the house for a few days. They done had a whole party at the frat house. The whole party. Everybody there just getting down, having them a good time. And so it's just like, you just see just foolery at its finest. People just really do not care about anybody. They really just care about themselves, their interests, what works for them. And so if it comes at the expense of everybody else, so be it. How many times have we seen the conversations of people saying, oh, well, people are going to die. It is what it is. And then I think that's why you saw the reaction that a lot of people had in regards to this past September 11th. A lot of people were like, don't say anything to me about 9/11 when you could care less about all the people who were dying in COVID-19. It's just like absolutely crazy. And it's funny, you see a selective response in when people want to comply. Because I started thinking back to after 9/11, and at the airports when they started doing the random searches. Remember they were doing that where there was no real protocol on how it worked. It would just be like you'd be walking and they randomly select you to be checked to just see if you have weapons. It was so interesting to see how many people in the white collective just were like, oh, I'm totally honored to do so. Of course, yeah, anything to protect America, check me all day. And of course, it's disproportionately checking black folks and other minority groups, so white people weren't pressed about it. But you didn't see a lot of them having these protests about, oh, I feel like my rights are being violated. I don't like being checked. They were watching everybody else get stopped before they get on their flight, get frisked down, sometimes have to go into another room. They got to dig all through your hair and see if you got something in there. They were silent then. You got to comply. This is about the protection of America. This is all about what we're doing. And even when they had the little red, orange, yellow, green, blue levels to kind of let everybody know what the terrorist threat was at the time. Back then, everybody was like, oh, yeah, well, hey, I heard they're on level yellow today. I think we need to stay in the house. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's a maverick. Everybody's about that life all of a sudden with COVID. I'm just like, privilege. And even, again, going back with this conversation with police brutality, like even how you just saw this clip of the man who was literally beat in the face by a police officer. And mind you, he was in a ride share. He wasn't even the person that was stopped. They stopped the person driving, I believe it was Lyft, because of a broken tail light. And of course, the officer wants identification for everybody in the car. And somehow it goes from that to this man pretty much just getting, hit pop in the face. face down, unarmed. I mean, that officer's been fired from what I read, but still, like, this is what we're living under. And so when people try to open their mouth to equate, oh, I couldn't wear a mask, to all of that, didn't they say that they've possibly found life on Venus, or there's a possibility that life exists on Venus? Listen, at this point, load the ships up. Some of y'all just gonna have to go. Like, go ahead and get on the ships. I promise you, I will not fight you for going. I don't even want to get in line first. Go right ahead. Have a good time. Have a good time. You know what I mean? Take your sunscreen as well. But you just see the foolery. People have just lost their minds, right? It's just crazy, and it's like every day it gets more intense and extreme, and I'm just like, I don't get it. And I think too many people are putting all of their eggs in this basket about a vaccine. To be honest, with a lot of pandemics that have happened in the past, before a vaccine even came into, fruition, the numbers had already dropped drastically enough where that pandemic was no longer even a threat. People had been able to figure out how to bring the numbers down, how to, practice whatever they practice, and it half the time it had phased out by the time the vaccine even came. I think too many people think that, okay, the vaccine will just show up and everybody goes and get it. First of all, most people are going to be scared to get the crap. Secondly, there's not going to be enough for everybody. I just saw a report where they were saying even if they did have a vaccine, they wouldn't have enough for everybody until 2024. So I think people need to realize that in order for COVID to slow down, at least within the United States, people are just going to have to be inconvenienced for a little bit. Those numbers have to go down. And what sucks is it's working in some cities, but there's so many other places that are they just refuse to try, that their refusal to even comply or I don't even like saying that because it almost sounds like a conversation about police, but their refusal to even acknowledge what's being said, it plays a role and indirectly affects everybody, because something like COVID, everything ties to everybody, unfortunately, because this is a country that's very interdependent, even though this is a country that's full of individuals, if that makes any sense. Everything that other people do will affect people as collateral. I didn't mean to talk about this so long, but that video, man, it's so frustrating. And even those parents, I'm glad I'm not a parent, because I'm not going to lie. If I had a child and my child had to go to that school, the way I would fight every one of those parents on site, on site. Now, we're going to have to stretch this out to a 3-month project, because I can't fight all of y'all at the same time. So we do about 2 a day for the next 3 months, all right? Y'all sign up and take shifts, okay? And I don't fight fair because I'm a smaller person, so I got to do whatever I can do to make it happen. But absolutely crazy. Then the last thing I do want to close on, I really do hope everything works out for those who have been affected by all the fires. It's so crazy that literally this time last year, we were having this same conversation. And remember, the fires were really, really bad last year, but this year they were even worse. And even around my hometown, like back in Washington State, like that same area, like it was starting to get into that area as far as at least the smoke, coming from different areas. And so that whole West Coast really kind of got hit really hard this year. And so I'm hoping things work out for a lot of the people who have been affected. And again, it goes to some of the conversations around something like climate change. I don't know if you saw this clip from earlier where the current president was in California and he's right there at this table meeting with officials and scientists and, people who, pay attention to weather patterns. And they're pretty much saying, Mr. President, if you could just meet us in the middle and work with us, we could really come to a solution that could definitely help and prevent this from happening again in the future. And then president's response, it'll get cooler.
I think one area of mutual agreement and priority is vegetation management. But I think we want to work with you to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests, and actually work together with that science. That science is going to be key, because if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay, it'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Hey, well, I don't think science knows, actually.
I was like, oh, God, you just believe me, it'll get cooler. I'm like, God, this, every single time, man, like, the thing with the current president, like, whether you like the man's politics or not, for me, I don't rock with any of his politics. I think it's even more offensive that the man is just incompetent. He just does not care. And then the funniest thing, he has, like, this God complex where if he says it, then it is what it is. Like, every single time, you keep seeing the pattern. And then, the cult following he has at this point, I mean, it doesn't matter what happens. It will never be anything good enough to challenge him on. Like, he is always right. I'm just like, it's crazy because it'll get cooler. Believe me. It's always a believe me or you won't even believe it. Said that about COVID. It's just going to disappear like magic. You just overnight. You won't even believe it, I'm just like, come on, people. Like, I was about to go to sleep, but while I'm at it, see, again, that... That's another experience with black skin in America. Watching mediocrity and privilege become empowered. And then you have to live under that system. You know how triggering that is to know, like, you know, I feel like most people in the United States, period, have a lot more common sense than the current person who's in charge. And to watch just anybody run the country and run the country into the ground, we all just got to kind of sit. You can't even really do too much about it because there's so many people that are enabling this entire person to stay in power. And then there's people who are also in elected positions who have bought into the foolery and are caping and protecting it. I don't know who the heck is bought out and who has what on who, but this is a real S-word show right now. I tell you, it'll get cooler. All these people that lost their houses. You know, I was just on the phone with my grandpa earlier today because he lives in LA, and he was talking about how there was all kind of ash on his car, and you know, he really has to stay in the house now for real. Couldn't even go out and cut his grass or nothing, just because when you're older like that, you really don't need to be out there with that kind of quality air. And then meanwhile, Mr. President out there, it'll get cooler. Yeah, because fall's coming, but we're talking about something that's more of a pattern. We're not just talking about the seasons changing after, you know, the fall equinox. No, we're talking like the next cycle of years where, you know, you're seeing a shift. And even when you're talking about like the people in the Gulf Coast who are getting ready to get hit by a few storms, and the people in Bermuda who were just affected by, you know, whatever storms came, you see all those storms in the Atlantic. And, you know, it's just the conversation is now about the extremities that you're seeing, where things that pretty much are already routine are happening at a more rapid pace, and they're becoming more intense. That's the conversation, not it'll get cooler. You won't even believe it. Believe me. Like, see, he gets to mess up the whole country, and then he gets to die in like 10 years, so he won't even have to be affected by none of this. Just crazy. Anyway, last thing. I think I'm going to talk about it on the next live when I get a chance, but there was a really interesting podcast. It's entitled Nice White Parents. And before you get in your feelings about the title, it's actually, if you're really into the conversations about like gentrification and, you know, how it ties into something like the education gap and a bunch of things like that, it's a really, really good podcast. It's only about 5 episodes, but it's pretty much just about, you know, a gentrified part of, I want to say Brooklyn, where you have some wealthy parents that pretty much take over a school that existed. And then you just, I don't know, they give a really great history of just race in America and segregation. One of the things I learned, I had no idea that New York City has never actually officially, you know, made legislation to actually end segregation after the Brown versus Board of Education. It was kind of just, I don't know, there's so many good little tidbits in it. I'm still wrapping it up, so once I finish, I'll definitely share my 2 cents on it on probably the next live. But if you want to check it out, you know, it's on Spotify. I think it's from the New York Times. I think you can go on their website and hear it on there too as well. But really interesting podcast. It's, like I said, it's 5 episodes. Check it out when you get a chance. We'll chat. Anyway, I'm out. Subscribe.
You gotta trim away. You got to cut the way you drag from place to place. You got to cut. What you gonna say with the hose in your way, or the baggage dropping off, cause you got to? What you gonna say with the hose in your way, or the baggage dropping off, cause you got to? What you gonna say with the hose in your way, or the baggage dropping off, cause you got to? What you gonna say with the hose in your way?